We've reached episode 7. If you followed this series from the beginning, you know everything that was lost: people, belongings, certainties, identity. You know the cost. Today, I'm going to tell you about what came next. It's about what emerges when you stop pretending and start being real, about what you find on the other side of everything you most feared losing. Stay here, because this is the part I was waiting to talk to you about. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. This is the second to last episode of the series, and the next one will be unlike anything I've ever published. You won't want to miss it. Subscribe and turn on notifications. There is a specific moment after everything collapses. It's not immediate. It doesn't happen the day after the big revelation. It doesn't happen the week after the difficult conversations. It doesn't happen when you're still in the middle of the rubble trying to understand what's left. It happens later, after the tears you didn't expect, after the anger you didn't know you had, after missing things you yourself chose to leave behind, after all of this settles down, after the dust settles, and you find yourself sitting in a silence unlike any other silence you've ever experienced. A silence that is not empty, a silence that is space. I don't know exactly when that moment arrived for me. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't illuminated by a ray of sunshine at the right moment with emotionally charged background music. It was ordinary, completely disconcertingly ordinary. I was doing something completely mundane, and suddenly I realized I was doing well. Not relieved, not euphoric, not with that artificial lightness of someone trying to convince themselves that they're okay. Genuinely, quietly, profoundly well. And I stood there for a moment processing that strange feeling, because I had forgotten what it was like. Or maybe I would never really know. The rebirth was not an explosion of light. It was a slow accumulation of small moments of authenticity. The first time I had an opinion and expressed it without first calculating whether it was acceptable within the system I had left. The first time I made a choice based on what I truly wanted and not on what was expected of me. The first time I spent an entire day without feeling divided, without having to manage different versions of myself, without the constant exhaustion of being an actor in the theater of my own life. Each of those moments was small in itself, but together they built something, a new foundation, unlike the previous one, not inherited, not imposed, not absorbed before I had the capacity to filter it, built by me, brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. I discovered things about myself that I never would have discovered if I had stayed where I was. I discovered that I liked things I had never allowed myself to explore, that I was thinking in ways I had never allowed myself to think before, that I had genuine opinions about the world that were my own, completely mine, not reflections of what I was taught to believe, but conclusions I reached myself through honest questioning and sincere searching. And to get to know these parts of myself, it was like being introduced to a stranger whom you immediately recognize. Like that paradoxical feeling of finding something completely new that at the same time seems like it's always been there waiting for you. Relationships were also being reorganized, not the old ones. Those remained where they had arrived, with that gentle cordiality and that distance that neither side knew how to close anymore. But new relationships began to emerge in ways I didn't expect. People I would never have met if I had remained within the close circle I lived in. People with completely different stories from mine, but who carried something familiar in their eyes. The same quality of someone who has been through fire and come out the other side, with scars and an honesty that only fire can forge. People who didn't need me to be a specific version of myself to accept me. They accepted me with my doubts, with my questions, with the beautiful messiness of being someone who is genuinely trying to understand the world instead of simply repeating what I've been taught. And to discover this kind of connection after years of conditional connections, it was one of the most profound experiences of my life. Leave a like now if this part of the story also resonates with you. And tell me in the comments, have you ever found this kind of genuine connection after going through a profound transformation? What was it like? I read them all. I learned to sit with uncertainty. This was perhaps the greatest transformation of all, because I had grown up in a system that offered certainty about everything, answers to all questions, maps for all territories, clarity about what was right and what was wrong in every possible situation. And suddenly I was in a world without that map, in a territory that hadn't been mapped out for me, where I would have to figure out the way on my own. At first, it was terrifying. The lack of certainty felt like a lack of solid ground. It's like walking through a fog, not knowing if the next step will lead to solid ground or throw you into an abyss. But gradually, very gradually, I learned that uncertainty is not the enemy. Not knowing is different from being lost. Questions without immediate answers are not threats to be eliminated. They are invitations. Invitations to keep searching, to keep growing, to keep being a person in motion instead of a person stuck in a place that was chosen for them before they had a say in the decision. I began to relate to spirituality in a completely different way. I'm not going to go into detail about what I believe right now because this video isn't about convincing anyone of anything. It was never about that. But I can say that for the first time in my life, what I believe is genuinely mine, not inherited, not imposed. I don't accept it for fear of the consequences of questioning it. Examined, questioned, tested, chosen. And there's a huge difference between believing in something because you're afraid not to believe it and to believe in something because you have honestly examined it and come to your own conclusion. The first is a prison that looks like a home. The second is a choice that feels like freedom. And I was finally making choices. Real, mine, free. My relationship with myself has changed completely. I learned to listen to myself, paying attention to that inner whisper I'd spent years training myself to ignore, taking what I felt seriously instead of immediately checking if that feeling was approved by the system, trusting my own perception of the world instead of constantly validating it against an external source of authority. I learned that I am a valid source of wisdom about my own life. No one knows my inner experience better than I do, that I have the right to examine the world with my own eyes and reach my own conclusions. This may sound obvious to some people, but for someone who grew up in an environment that systematically distrusts individual perception in favor of collective authority, this is a revolutionary discovery. I also learned to forgive. Not in the sense of absolving, not in the sense of pretending that nothing happened or that the consequences weren't real, but in the sense of letting go. To understand that the people who taught me the system I grew up in genuinely believed they were doing the right thing. That the love they had for me was real, even when expressed within structures that proved to be limiting. No one wakes up in the morning determined to arrest another person. Emotional prisons are built with the best intentions in the world. And to realize that, it doesn't eliminate the pain, but it softens the anger. And the softened anger becomes something more usable. It becomes a learning experience, turned into compassion. It transforms the ability to look back without bitterness and look forward without fear. There was a morning. A few months later, I woke up and went to the window, and I stood there looking outside for a while. I wasn't expecting anything special. I wasn't meditating. I wasn't having any planned cinematic moment. I was alone, there, present, whole. And I realized that I was okay. Not in the way I used to perform well, in its true form, in a way that doesn't need an audience, in a way that's truly there even when nobody's watching. And I smiled. Not the calculated smile from before, a smile that came from within, still, genuine, my. And in that simple and utterly ordinary moment, I knew I had arrived somewhere. Not at the destination, because destinations are for journeys that come to an end, and my journey was only truly beginning. But I had arrived at a place where I could finally breathe. And now comes the final episode of this series. That which is different from all the others. Because in the other episodes, I talked about myself. Next, I'm going to talk about you, regarding where you are on your journey. Here's what I want you to take away from this series, regarding why you're not as alone as you seem. If this series touched something deep within you, the next episode was made especially for you. Don't jump.